everyone, and we'll get started on our beginner session tonight. Welcome to the RASC Winnipeg Incorporated and our monthly meeting. And first, I'd like to do our land acknowledgement. The lands from which our members and guests are joining us are located on the original lands of Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. We respect the treaties that were made on these territories. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and we dedicate ourselves to move forward in partnership with Indigenous communities in the spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. So tonight, our beginner session, I'll be leading it. It's fairly easy. Again, I'm going to introduce, this is the second episode. We'd looked at the first episode before a while back, and it's Laurie Rousseau-Neptune, and she's a young astrophysicist that actually works in Hawaii at the Canada-France-Hawaii Telescope. And we're going to look at number 2 in the episode, which is research. Yep. And we'll see how our sound does.
That's the output. Actually, it's him. He's got to switch it. Where is he?
I don't know.
Hang on.
Yeah. What's that?
My name is Laurie Rousseau-Neptune, and I work as a resident astronomer for the Canada-France-Hawaii Telescope. I'm leading an important research project on the formation of stars, which lets me work with researchers from all over the world. It's also part of my job to explain why astronomy research matters. Because for me, it's important to know that we are part of the universe, and that the universe is also a part of us. There are 3 excellent sites on Earth for astronomical observation: the Canary Islands off the northwestern coast of Africa, the Atacama Desert in Chile, and here, on the island of Hawaii in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. During my PhD at Laval University, I participated in the creation of a very powerful astronomical tool called CITEL. And when CITEL left Quebec to be installed on a telescope in Hawaii, I went with it. It's funny, because in French, CITEL means nuthatch, a bird found in Quebec. You could say we spread our wings at the same time. At university, I quickly realized that I loved spending time in observatories, working with cameras and tools. Being a resident astronomer is my dream job. I knew that landing a job like that would be perfect for me. I was so lucky because this job opened up just as I was graduating. So I applied and I got it. And it's on Mauna Kea, which was my first choice. Since arriving at the Canada-France-Hawaii telescope, most of my duties have been related to CITEL. I help foreign researchers use CITEL while also doing my own research on star formation. To understand how stars are formed, we must explore galaxies that hold billions of other stars. Galaxies are also made up of clouds of gas and dust, called nebulas. A section of a nebula can collapse under the force of its own gravity, turning it into a clump of gas surrounded by a disk of dust. The more this clump contracts, the hotter its core gets. It can reach millions of degrees Celsius, which causes another reaction. In the center, lighter elements like hydrogen combine to create heavier ones, like helium. That's called nuclear fusion. This produces a lot of energy and makes the clump of gas shine. That's when it becomes a star. The dust and gas that gather around the star may eventually form new planets. That's what happened in our solar system. When we were working on CITEL back in Quebec, we couldn't have imagined a better location for it than Mauna Kea. It's an exceptional site to practice astronomy. It's a high mountain, so it is free of much of the Earth's atmosphere, which absorbs the light of galaxies and stars. Also, the mountain itself is quite far from major cities, so you don't have the same kind of light pollution that you get in places like Toronto or Montreal. And the mountain is surrounded by the Pacific Ocean. It's flat all around. Another important phenomenon is that the wind sweeps over the mountain from east to west. When the wind gets to the summit, it flows in a straight line. It is very flat, very laminar. There's very little wind turbulence. Turbulent air is what makes stars twinkle, which in turn makes them look blurry in pictures. Here we have the perfect setup to get clear images. There are 12 science observatories on the mountain. They're equipped with different cameras and devices to study various phenomena such as galaxies, exoplanets, which are planets outside our solar system, and cosmology, to look at galaxies that are far, far away. I mostly use CITEL, which is a spectrometer mounted under our telescope. It allows me to study the composition, movement, and temperature of star-forming regions in the universe. With a clear sky, the color of some stars is visible to the naked eye, but it's much clearer on astronomy pictures. The color of a star is related to its surface temperature. Blue stars are very hot, reaching over 7,000 degrees Celsius. Red stars are less than 4,000 degrees. That's rather cold for a star. Stars also differ in size. We have small ones called dwarves and bigger ones called giants and supergiants. Our sun is a yellow dwarf. It's not very big or very hot. The culmination of my work on CITEL is here, where I work on my project on star formation called SIGNALS. It's a project that allows me to use the full power of CITEL. In astronomy, we perform what we call legacy surveys, where we observe many objects at once in order to understand how they were formed and how they are evolving. Several surveys have been done on the galaxies around us. Each has a different shape, mass, and brightness, and we want to know why. SIGNALS is a similar type of survey, but this time we're focusing on areas of star formation. The SIGNALS project has 40 target galaxies. We observe tens of thousands of star-forming regions to try to understand how they form, how they evolve, and why they are the way they are. With a bit of luck, we'll gather enough information to understand how stars have been forming from the beginning of the universe to the present and even beyond. The difference between stars is mostly due to where they are born. It's often much quieter on the outer edge of a galaxy. That's where there are fewer stars and the elements are much lighter. The middle of the galaxy holds a wider variety of stars and heavier elements. Stars that hold a lot of heavy elements are called enriched stars. When nuclear fusion stops inside a star, that star dies and some of its components are scattered into space. These elements will be used to form a new generation of stars. This means that all stars are enriched by elements passed down from their ancestors. This recycling process takes place in every galaxy in the universe, regardless of their shape. It's true for a spiral galaxy, an elliptical galaxy, which is elongated, and an irregular galaxy that doesn't have a distinct shape. SIGNALS looks at a sample of around 50,000 star formation areas. Some of them are in remote parts of the universe where there haven't been many generations of stars. And we believe these areas might look a lot like the initial conditions right at the beginning, when the universe was born. We also have star-forming regions located at the heart of massive galaxies that have seen many generations of stars enrich the interstellar medium. The conditions there are so different. The way stars form there is very different too. These regions are like a window into the future of star formation, as the universe continues to be enriched. You might think, what's the use of learning more about the universe around us when it's so big? Sometimes it seems so disconnected from our daily lives that it can be hard to understand what the point is. Just knowing how our universe came to be, knowing the sequence of events that got us where we are today, with all the diversity that exists in the universe, it's fascinating. If you removed all this knowledge from my life and from my brain, I don't think I'd feel as complete. I remember the way I looked at science and the sky at that age. Even with all the experience I have now, I've managed to keep a sense of wonder.
So I do have a story for tonight. I think I got enough light. Yeah, I do. Just need to adjust that. There you go. So just continuing on with our bit of a theme from Hawaii. And this is the story of Hina, which is actually a Polynesian story. Long ago, a woman named Hina lived in Hawaii. Hina had a talent for turning tree bark into a special kind of cloth called tapa. She bleached and dyed the tapa, then used wooden stamps to imprint the cloth with pictures. The cloth was so well made and beautifully decorated that Hina's neighbors asked her to make tapa for them too. Even the chief of her village insisted that his tapa be made by Hina. Hina had to work all day to keep up with the many requests for a tapa. At first, she loved her work, but eventually she became frustrated, for she had so little free time. Her son, Maui, did not help at all. Her husband, Aikanaka, did not help either. He spent his days hunting and his evenings complaining. He was bossy and expected Hina to fish for their supper, bring fresh water, and make a poi. One morning, Hina decided she wanted to enjoy life and not work so much. She prayed to her guardian angel, Laukuki, to guide her to a new home. She waited for a sign, but nothing happened. Nothing changed. When the sun was high in the sky, Hina gave up and walked to the stream to collect fresh water in her gourds. At the stream, Hina saw a rainbow that started in the grass, but reached towards the sun. Perhaps, I'm going to say this name wrong 3 times, Lahiki had answered her prayers. Hoping the sun was to be her new home, she stepped onto the rainbow and began to journey upward. Hina walked for a very long time, but the closer she got to the sun, the more weary she became. Her skin turned red, her feet grew swollen, and an incredible giddiness overcame her. With a sudden lurch downward, Hina lost her footing and fell back to earth. Hina lay on the grass all afternoon and into the evening. By the time she felt well enough to walk, The sun had set, and moonbeams shone down upon her skin. Once again, she prayed to Lahiki to lead her to a place where she could be happy. Hina waited and waited, but did not sense a reply. She gathered her gourds, filled them with water, and returned to the cave where she lived with Aikahana. As soon as Aikahana saw Hina, he shouted for his supper. Hina ignored him and gathered her tapa-making tools in a basket. Aikanaka bellowed again for something to eat, but instead of answering, Hina took her basket and stormed out of the cave. Hina strode back towards the stream and saw the rainbow still arching skyward from the grass. Once again, she stepped onto the rainbow and began to climb. Up, up she went, never looking back until suddenly she heard shouting. Turning, she saw Akahana Naka on the rainbow, trying to follow her into the sky. The rainbow was not strong enough to hold him, and just as he caught up to Hina, he began to slip down. Aikanaka tried to save himself by hanging on to Hina's ankle. She pulled it free, but was badly bruised in the spot his hand touched. Despite the pain, Hina limped onward until she finally reached the moon. Hina made her home on the moon and found it so peaceful, she once again enjoyed life. If you look up, you can see the Hawaiian goddess turning bark into tapa. When rain falls, the Hawaiians say she must be sprinkling water on the cloth. And when lightning strikes, they imagine her shaking folds out of the tapa. A cloud-covered sky means Hina has spread the cloth out to dry. Hina is a Polynesian goddess known as the guardian of the underworld and a patroness of arts and crafts. She has also been called Ina, Sina, and Rona. And this story comes out of Dot to Dot in the Sky, Stories of the Moon, by Joan Marie Glatt, and illustrations by Lorna Benton. Yeah, we're doing not too bad. So we just got a few more minutes before our meeting gets started. So a couple of things. So do you know what a male astronomer does when he needs a haircut? He clips it. What? I don't see any groaning coming out of the computer. So it must be pretty good out in the ether world. So if you weren't picking up on it, I'll just say it now, since we have a few minutes before the meeting starts. I do want to say Happy International Women's Day tonight to everyone who's here. And in fact, if the women that are in the audience, if you wouldn't mind standing up just for a second, stand up, please. Just want to recognize you formally. These are all the people. Thank you in the back. And again, all of you, I just want to thank you all for being with us while we promote, and you're the ones that show others that the science of astronomy and our hobby is something for everyone. And also to recognize that at least 3 members in our council, or not council, in the center have their doctorates, and that's Danielle, Michelle, and Judy. And just to recognize them and point out again those role models that are there for all of us who are members here in the RASC Winnipeg Center. And I just checked my time. Well, I still got 4 more minutes before I can move on. So does anybody, I don't see anything in the chat. Does anybody have any questions before we get started tonight? So tonight will be our AGM, but we have to formally wait till 7:30. Yeah, we can turn the lights up, sorry. Making me bigger.
Yeah. Smaller.
Yeah, smaller. Oh no, I shrunk. And for all the people online, just say hi to Murray, Alan, Mike, Paul, Doug, Catherine, Suzanne. Sorry, I said Susan, but it's Suzanne. And all the good things. Just curious, show of hands here for how many people are traveling to see the eclipse in April? That's a majority. And how many are going to be here in Winnipeg? Wow, look at that. Did you know that we're going to be doing a public event on that day? And if you wanted to be able to share that event and that spectacle of the heavens together, we are going to have a public outreach working with the Manitoba Museum. So I just thought I'd put that plug in there right now. So if you are available, we'd welcome you to come join us on that day for those who are not traveling to see the full eclipse. If it wasn't the AGM night, I would just carry on, but. Does anybody else have a good joke like mine? Or you just don't want to follow them? Oh, go ahead.
Why couldn't the bicycle stand up by itself?
Why couldn't the bicycle stand up for itself? I don't know.
It was too tired.
It was too tired for those that are online. One more minute, we can get started. Sure, go ahead and do one more.
How many tickles does it take to make an octopus laugh? Yeah.
Ah, there you go. Tentacles. Excellent. Well, I'll get our slideshow up here. Let me make sure screen. Good. All right, so I'm gonna start our meeting and then move into our AGM in just a moment. So tonight, this is the agenda for tonight, the whole meeting. So we just did our beginner session with some awesome jokes there. I'm going to do the meeting welcome, which is just the introduction here. We will do our AGM first, followed by announcements and then a break, followed by What's Up by Brian Stack and What's New is Dr. Michelle Boyce. And our main presentation tonight is Dr. Mark Buey, who's going to give us the latest results from the Lucy mission. And of course, for those who are interested, over at the Pembina Boston Pizza, there's a bit of a gathering afterwards. So without further ado, I will call our annual general meeting of the RASC Winnipeg Centre Incorporated to order. This is the agenda for tonight. So opening and welcome, quorum, we need a minimum of 31 persons in person and online, and we have met that. So we do have a quorum, so business can be conducted. The first thing I'm going to do, the rest of the agenda is the adoption of previous minutes, president's report, financial report, followed by elections and adjournment. There were no resolutions or special resolutions put forward to the council. So that's the entirety of the business for this evening. Does anybody have any questions on the agenda? All right. And you have the minutes in here, right? Yeah, so the minutes were previously circulated.
Yeah.
There, is that showing up there? So the minutes have been circulated prior to the meeting. Do we have, I need a mover for the minutes. I have a mover showing Stan Runge, a seconder, Ed Wright. Do I have any errors or omissions or questions about the minutes? All those in favor, please raise your hand. And I just got to go to Zoom here for a second. Is there anything in chat? Any questions? And it's carried. Presence report. Oh, yeah, I gotta read. There you go. Well, you get to hear a lot from me tonight. There you go. Am I centered on the camera fine enough? All right, good evening. So the president's report. I just want to begin by thanking the outgoing council for all the work that they've done this past year. Judy Anderson, Ed Wright, Mike Caracas, Michelle Boyce, Mark Sarazin, Mark Irvine, Scott Young, Kamala Cody, Najis Yoshaya, Wing Kwong, Damon Nightshade, Stan Runge, and Brian Stack. I would next like to thank all our volunteers who stepped up to take on roles in our monthly meeting presentations. And next in line to thank are the center volunteers who took on roles to provide outreach or astronomy events to the center and public. With you, our hobby of the science of astronomy is shared with the wider community, and thank you very much for that. This past year, the council was busy supporting outreach and working to achieve the goals in the strategic plan and the bylaw. 3 committees are active now: finance, fundraising, and observatory. The Finance Committee meets from time to time to ensure our compliance with financial policies and procedures and make recommendations to the council on behalf of the members. Mark Irvine is the chair of the Finance Committee. The Fundraising Committee will work to help fund any projects or programs that fall outside of the normal budget. For instance, they work to help fund the Telescopes for Kids program. Wing Kwong is the chair of this committee. The Observatory Committee works on keeping Glenlee operational and has also been tasked with reviewing the Glenlee facility and how it could develop, identifying possible public outreach sites, and identifying possible observing sites, such as the north of the city. Council is working on developing additional policies and procedures for these committees. The provincial disaster assistance claim for the flooding of Glenlee is slowly progressing, and I mean slowly. We are hoping to recover some of the cleanup costs. Several upgrades were completed at Glenlee this past year to improve the member experience. Council implemented a members' night that happens regardless of the sky conditions. The thought is that members could still come out, socialize, learn about the observatory, or get some help with their equipment. The past years saw consistent membership numbers of around 240 mark. A very large turnout at the Sprucewood Star Party enjoyed its beautiful dark skies. This is also a normal and sign of a healthy membership. Council began the regular review of our strategic plan as we are halfway through its 5-year term. The strategic plan documents is located on the members section of the website. Overall, Council met many of the goals of the plan. It was a good year with lots of members volunteering to run and or participate in the many public outreach events that the RASC Winnipeg Centre Inc. provided. Finances are stable and the budget is balanced. New initiatives are being investigated and the future looks positive. Well, that wraps up my annual report for the year 2023. Thank you all for the privilege of being your president. Clear skies, Dennis Lyons. Does anybody have any questions for me for the president's report? All right, then I'm going to call on Mark Irvine, our treasurer, to come up and present our financial statements for 2023.
Thanks, Dennis.
Okay.
Were you in there? Meter on a USB. Let's see if it connects.
Need to
Escape.
Yeah.
Found it. Let's see. I just turned on. Sure.
Let me just.
Oh, there it goes. Very good.
I'll let you run it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, hopefully everybody can hear and see me. And I'm not just a neck on the camera. Okay. Well, I'm a year-old treasurer for you guys. It's been a year. And as Dennis mentioned before, we've formed an actual finance committee. So I'd like to begin just by offering my thanks to those who actually did stand with me on the finance committee and offer to support me along the way for this year. Abdul, who was the finance treasurer last time, Judy Anderson, James Fast, and Kyle Galbraith were our auditors. David Parfett. I don't think I've ever formally met David. If he's here tonight, I'd like to see him put his hand up because we've only ever been online, but he was a former treasurer from the Ottawa Centre. Ed Wright, of course, and I think Dennis is probably an honorary member of all the committees, but anyhow, thanks to all those folks for helping me out for this past year. And we did have to put in place some fairly regimented processes that weren't there before. We used to have a fairly, low-key finance process in the past. And now that we've incorporated, we need to be a bit more structured about it. So I spent a fair amount of effort early on in the year doing that and putting the financial statements together. So I guess going ahead with that, I guess I'll start with the balance sheet as we finished at the end of the year. I'm just going to close this. Hopefully that's
For Zoom.
okay. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Just going to share everything that's up there. So
Okay.
okay.
Do I have a pointer at all? I didn't bring one. Okay, well, in the interim, I don't know how many of those folks out there. I know the finance committee people are familiar with the reports, but we actually went to a, thanks very much. We found a free software, financial software called Wave, and it produces some fairly rudimentary statements, but it helps. And what it does, it allows us to organize. I'm not gonna, I think this is a good way to put everybody to sleep. So essentially, this is a balance sheet. It tells us what's, our assets, our liabilities, and what we have as a club invested in our organization. So looking things over, you can see at the end of the year, we had about just straight operating accounts. We had about $11,000. We also had some accounts receivable, which was an actual outreach item that we looked after in January. Then we billed it in December though. And then these are our GICs that are outstanding. So you can see based on the totals here, we are fairly well off as far as our cash positions is concerned. Skipped ahead too much. So we have about $11,000 in cash in our operating account and another $12,000 in current assets, most of which is in GICs. Throughout the year, we were flush with cash. We had over $20,000 in our general bank account, and we invested $9,000 in a cashable GIC that was bearing about 5% interest. I haven't seen 5% interest in a GIC in many years, so we grabbed hold, and that cashable GIC basically pays us out every year, and it's also very liquid. So I can take the money out anytime I want without penalty. It's a feature that a lot of the banks have gone to now, but they're fairly recent in their kind of use. So the other $2,000 item there is what we've set aside to guarantee a credit balance on a credit card that we've applied for. And it's been almost a year that we've had our application in for a credit card. being a new organization, of course, we had no history. So it took a little while to, and it still is taking a little while to work through that. But that's what that $2,000 is for. And then the other is a $1,000 GIC that actually matured in February and is still waiting to be deposited into our bank account, but it's at the bank. So anyway, you can see that the club is fairly flush financially on the cash side. We also have a number of assets. And as you can see, the biggest piece of that is our observatory currently. That was on an asset inventory that I was given at the beginning of the year. I'm not sure how generous that value is, but it's what we had in the books or on the inventory list at the beginning of this year. So that dome, if you've been up to Glen Lee, the building, the warm room, and the dome, we have evaluated at a cost of $52,000. And I think it would probably cost us more than that to replace it. But that's not the intention of this. Of course, on financial statements, it's to reflect what we paid for it. And that might have been in $78 or $77. So who knows what the thing is actually worth. We haven't ever had it appraised, but that's what the historical cost essentially is. We have a telescope in there at about $7,000, the LX200, and that does reflect the new mount that we put on. That $7,200 balance. And a series of loaner scopes that Mike looks after. Those are the values we placed on them, and essentially those are the values that what we paid for them and we've recorded. The sound system that we're benefiting from here today, we bought last year, is up there as an asset as well. So you can see, you know, we have cash and we have a number of hard assets in our club. So we're in very good shape financially from a center perspective. I wish I could say the same for national. Maybe I'll skip the cash flow. We'll come back to that one. It always confuses people, but let's look at this is our income statement. Again, the names on the statements or the names of the files come with the software. I mean, we're a nonprofit, but the financial statements typically have business-related names. So this is profit and loss. I couldn't change that label. It really should be receipts and disbursements, and then kind of a net result of that. But you can see at the end of the year, most of our revenue, of course, comes from membership fees. We had some publication revenue, which came from, we call it's calendar sales, essentially. Like when we sold calendars, that's how much we recouped. We had some event revenue, which was, we were very lucky because Damon managed to sell a good number of eclipse glasses at the annular eclipse in October. And that's what that reflects primarily, plus a few other items that we've done over the year for outreach. Investment income, I expect this to actually climb quite a bit this year because of the investments we've made. That's interest. And of course, we had 3 cents miscellaneous where Damon and I were testing the EFT process to make sure it worked for the Spruce Woods Star Party. So we put through a few pennies to deposit into the bank account. They're essentially gifts. So, but to make things balanced, we got to conclude them. We don't have cost of goods sold because again, the format of the statement is set by the software. I couldn't exclude it. We don't sell anything. Essentially, we're not in the business of selling goods where we manufacture and sell. So our operating expenses are the things that we do as a club. The Spruce Woods Star Party, these costs are basically the cost of our speakers and the breakfast we served, the lunch we served, and that's it. Really, it's a very inexpensive year. $350 to run that whole event is extraordinary, basically for a club and the success of it, right? Looking further on, this year was actually a good year for outreach, but it also reflects additional costs that we've had over the prior years. We've had to replenish our supplies, and that's what that really reflects. It reflects the eclipse glasses. It reflects some outreach materials that we gave to the people that come to our various events. Astronomy Day, we did a On the Move ink for daycare. in the summertime. We've done other outreach events across the province. And when we bring handouts with us, those are purchased from the National Society and group, and we have to buy them, and that's what goes in there. Other things, of course, we have meeting costs. This meeting cost us some equipment we purchased last year. Speaker honoraria essentially comes out to the meteors and postage. Like when we have a speaker, we like to give them a meteor, and it's not free. So publications, anything we decide to purchase and send out. I couldn't specifically, I don't from memory remember what the $169 is, but it's typically things that, you know, we've offered to our outreach folks. Observatory maintenance, that was a bigger one last year. Some of us are intimate with it and what we did. We had a flood 2 years ago, and those flood costs or those flood issues had to be addressed. So those costs are reflected in there. We don't expect it to be that high again. We haven't budgeted that high. And then, of course, this is basically me, office supplies. I need postage and I need stamps and I need binders. And there's no shortage of binders when things are manual with small club. So $20. Moving down the list. You guys still awake? Okay, barely, right? Bank fees, they went up a bit because what we did is we incorporated, which makes things tricky. The bank wants us to fill out a bunch more paperwork. We have to change bank account numbers. We have to, you know, consolidate things, rename things, issue new checks. And I would say the bulk of that cost was brand new checks we had to issue because we have a new account number. Moving along, insurance, that's typical. We had to take out, or we typically take out insurance to cover the buildings and property. And I'm not sure if it covers any liability or not, but national. So this is basically, yeah, I mean, if we had a fire or any of our buildings got damaged, unfortunately not through flood, because we investigated the insurance for flood, and flood is an act of God, which insurers don't like and do not cover. So if we had damage from vandals, like Hamilton Center had their observatory run into, you guys may have seen that in some of one of the publications or magazines. Things like that would be covered with our insurance. And if somebody leaves a coffee maker on and the warm room burns down, kind of thing. Cloud services, that was, you know, basically our meetings, you know, our online costs to hold meetings, you know, essentially through the pandemic, but we still do it. I mean, we're being broadcast now. And so that's the cloud services that we've incurred. Audit and legal, this is our legal fees to incorporate. And they're actually tax deductible. Depreciation expense, that's basically a long story, but I won't tell it. It's essentially reflecting the usage of our assets over time. And it means if you use a piece of equipment, you try to reflect the use of that equipment over the year you've been in business. And this is what this amount here is a non-cash. It means we don't spend it. It's not a reserve. It doesn't sit in a bank account anywhere. It just, we put it in the financial statements to reflect that we've used our asset for that year, and the asset doesn't last forever. Essentially, sometime we're going to have to repair it. It's a generally accepted accounting principle to take depreciation expense. So that's one of those things that we had to take into our financial statements this year in order to be compliant with generally accepted accounting principles, file the returns, file the tax returns, do all the government reporting we need to do. So again, total operating expenses, it looks bad, but when you take out this number, we're actually about $1,000 to the good. This is a non-cash expense. The 4105 is non-cash. So add that back to the $3,000 and we're about $1,000 cash good, which is a very sound position for the organization to be in. You know, thank goodness, and thanks to good management from the council and Dennis. I don't think I'm going to go into the cash flow unless we can talk about it some other time if anybody's really interested. Because the cash flow essentially says, here's how you got cash and here's how you spent cash. And it's different than income and different than balance sheet. So, but people are more in tune with income and balance sheet stuff. So I don't see any real driving need to see the cash flow statements. Those are all required statements for regulatory reporting, tax reporting, which I'm in the process of doing right now for the first year. So I guess the call to question.
Are you going to move to?
Sure, I'll move that we accept the financial reports as presented.
And could I have a seconder, please? Stan Bunch. Any discussion? Any discussion on the chat? No discussion on the chat?
Oh, Jay.
Question, Jay?
I don't see an entry for the scholarship that we normally give to St. John's. Has that gone by the board?
No record of it at all. I have no record of any scholarship being awarded or any scholarship being funded. If there's any of the other, if it was put into another account, I mean, when I took over the financial statements, there was no account there reflecting a scholarship, or if there, like, really, we wouldn't have a, unless we were retaining an amount on behalf of the organization, the U of M, like if we were retaining a fund, like we do with, Spruce Woods, then we'd have money on our balance sheet.
In the past, what it is it's been sent to this college as dollar amount.
Okay, so what we would have done is at that point, we would have probably had it show up on the income statement as an operating expense. And
something that's fallen off the table because their original agreement with St. John's was to give them $300 or maybe $500 scholarship every year. So council's going to have to revisit that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. If it's something that we should have been paying all the way along, sure. Yeah. Go ahead. No, it's perfect time.
Yeah. I don't know how insolvent National is, but our liability insurance comes from National. Maybe putting us in a precarious position.
Oh, National is, the insurance is fine, it's paid up, and yeah, we're good till AGM, I believe, till the next one's due. It's budgeted in the current budget. Insurance, everything's there, so that part of it isn't. And National, since it's been raised, is working towards becoming solvent again. So they are on a better track. That's all I will state. A better track. Any other questions?
Yep.
All in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Any comments for the passing motion on it? Then it's passed. We accept the financials. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
He did mention in the, I'll just wait. Let's get the.
Yeah. Oh, you want to get the other presentation back?
No, I need this.
Oh. Okay. You're not being heard.
No.
All right. Thanks. Yeah.
So the only other thing I wanted to mention there, one of the things council has brought in for any outreach events, we now charge a fee, and that's to help offset the cost of our materials that we give out at outreach events. So you might hear or see, if you go and actually read all of it, this will be posted on the website, the financials, but we do charge, I believe it's $100 for a half or a couple hours, and then anything more than that's a couple $100. $200, sorry. So we started charging that because one of our largest expenses was when we have to redo the refill all our giveaway stuff, and we just knew that we couldn't keep that up indefinitely, especially with the way the cost of everything is going up today. So that if you see it there, it's not a money-making thing. We're not giving honorariums out to volunteers. It's meant to recover those costs. Okay. Oh, let's move on to the next thing. President's report, financial report. We're now going to move to elections. So I will just make one call for nominations from the floor. Any nominations from the floor? Go ahead, Stan. Gail, will you accept the counselor position? Okay, so we have Gail Wise. Are there any other nominations? On Zoom, for those of you in Zoom, is there any nominations on Zoom? As being the chair also of the elections committee, I will now declare that Gail Wise, I gotta do this in the right order. First, I have to officially declare the secretary, Scott Young, as by acclamation, has won. The directors, Ed Scott, Michelle Boyce, and Mark Sarazin, again, declared by acclamation. Councillors Wing Wong and Wing Kwong, geez, I'm bad. And Gail Wise as elected by acclamation. Congratulations, welcome to council. So before I do adjournment, I do have one more thing to do. Judy, did you want to come up and join me on this? So the RASC Winnipeg Center has 2 awards that we present. Now just waiting for Judy, who's our vice president, to come up. And we'll make... There you go. I've been directed to stand in front of the camera. So we'll do this one first. Yep, perfect. So the first award we're going to present tonight is the RASC Winnipeg Center Award for Outstanding Achievement. And for 2023, I would like to call Mike Krakis forward, please.
Somebody needs to take a picture. You got a selfie?
I'll take a picture. But you can do, Judy, do you mind just reading off what it's for? Oh, here, Judy.
So, Mike, it's my pleasure to give you this Achievement Award for and recognition of excellence in planetary imaging. How's that for brief? I guess Dennis needs you to come on over.
Okay.
There's a plaque that
wonderful.
goes into the observatory, and here's a certificate.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay,
Perfect. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you. The black later on. Thank you.
I don't think
No, but we'll still on. Yeah. And for our second presentation tonight, the individual doesn't appear to be here tonight. But our second award, RASC Winnipeg Center for Outstanding Service, and we're recognizing for 2023, Danielle Pahut. So for Danielle's work and outreach and everything else that she does. So unfortunately, Danielle's not here tonight. I'm not sure if she's online, but if she is, congratulations. So first there's this, and then Judy can read
oh, it's the same as what.
Oh, okay, so there you go. For her work outreach for astronomy, bringing the science to everyone around us. And I'll just say this.
Oh, yeah, the camera.
The camera, yeah, there you go. Done that good? I'm getting a thumbs up from our IT section, so that's pretty good, especially for me. That's a big joke at work. Yeah, Dennis in IT? I don't think so. So with that, and since there's no further business that was presented to the council to be brought forward tonight, I will now adjourn the 2024 annual general meeting. Thank you very much. Thank you again, Judy.
Very transient items.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to do the. Just checking our time. Well, I couldn't have done that any better. So 8 o'clock, 8 o'clock according to the schedule is our break. We'll break for 20 minutes. and then we'll come back and carry on with the meeting. So let's please go out. Soup for You is open, and please support them. And we'll start back at 20 after 8. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I'm just gonna take that.
Where's you want to stop the recording here?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, just pause it.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome back. We're going to get going here in just a second. Ed's trying to corral herd cats here, and I'm one of those cats. All right, so I'm just going to get ready, share my screen. And again, welcome back, everyone. There we go. Oh, deathly silence. It's good. All right, announcements. Just going to go through the announcements shortly here. So first off, just again, a reminder about the Lockhart Planetarium at the University of Manitoba. Danielle Pahut's coordinating that, who is again one of our outreach winners tonight. The Observatory Committee, Michelle Boyce is our chair for that. If you're interested in assisting the committee, please reach out to Michelle and talk to her. Fundraising committee, as was mentioned in our AGM, Wing Kwong is coordinating that. We also have the postcards that are made up from members who have donated, or sorry, not donated, but allowed the use of their imaging. Very, very, very nice. If you're interested, please contact Wing. And again, that's one of the fundraisers we use to support some of the events that are coming up. Explore the Universe, Stan Runge. Stan, did you have anything to say tonight? Okay, and sorry, Michelle, did you have anything to say tonight? Observatory? No. Okay. Telescope Loaner Program, Mike Caracas, one of our winners tonight of our Center Awards. Mike, anything you want to mention about that? I will mention, we do have one new member that was talking to me. I won't point him out. What our Telescope Loaner Program is, we have telescopes you can borrow from us as a member. So different types of telescopes to be able to use for that, okay? So Mike, just hold your hand up. He's the guy you would talk to. So any new members, if you're not sure, he's the fellow you'd want to talk to and say hi, and he could tell you a little bit about what's available and how to go about borrowing a scope. Telescopes for kids. There were 5 recipients. They'll be announced shortly. The winners have been chosen. And like I said, the formal announcement will come out shortly. Telescope tune-up, March 23rd. James sent us a slide. Is it in here? No. Okay, so James Fast is hosting that. March 23rd. The information is available on the website. It's a telescope tune-up for the members. Chair of the Sprucewood Star Party is Damon Nightshout, and that is going to happen the long weekend of September this year. If you have any workshop ideas or volunteers, Telescope Tune-Up is one of the workshops. We had an imaging workshop by Michelle. If you have any other workshops you'd like to see put on, please reach out to Stan Runge. Stan, just hold your hand up there if you're not familiar who Stan is. And Stan would love to hear that, and then he would work with you to help find somebody to facilitate it. Solar Eclipse volunteers, I mentioned earlier, April 8th. Contact Scott Young if you're available. And I saw about half the hands in this room are available. Again, even if you don't have a scope, it's good to come out. If the skies are clear, even though it's during the day on the Monday, we do expect large crowds, even for a partial eclipse here in the city. So if you're available, please help and come out and volunteer. Oh, it says continue. Go to the next slide. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed the question.
Oh, I want to go back a bit. What are they doing to the keys?
Yeah, I would expect next month. And for that, if you didn't hear, it was asking about the new key. The observatory will be rekeyed, and when we do that, we'll announce it. The announcement will probably go just prior to this meeting, so that when people come, they'll be able to get it. And then again, there'll be people at the observatory the following night for members' night, and then you'll have to contact the person who's coordinating the keys at that time, the key exchange. And that's how we see it happening, is a key exchange. So if you got an old key, you'll exchange it for a new one. Okay. And again, the observatory is one of the benefits of being a member of the RASC Winnipeg. If you're not a member, you cannot use the observatory. And it's just time that we had to start looking at rekeying. There's a white shell outreach on the May long weekend. If you're interested, reach out to one of the members on council. The postcard fundraiser, as I mentioned, by Wing. Wing, did you want to speak to that at all, or are you good with what I've said so far? You're good? There you go. You moved on me. I was like, where's Wing? If you know anybody who's an RAC member who lives up in the Lac du Bonnet area, north of it, please let me know. There's a school group up there that would love to have an outreach event, but they are quite a distance from the city. Observatory being rekeyed, as we mentioned, and science rendezvous. What day is that, Stan?
May the 11th.
May the 11th at the University of Manitoba.
Yes.
And if anybody wants to volunteer, please contact Stan.
Probably not volunteers right now.
Yeah, you never know when somebody can't make it all of a sudden. So good.
It's a very fun event. You get a meal, you get a free t-shirt with it.
Who doesn't want a free t-shirt? That's almost as good as my jokes. Oh, Judy, you want a free t-shirt or my jokes?
The University of Manitoba and all of the people that organized and contributed to Scientonomical last year were part of this. U of M got a national award for outreach for that event. It's held all across Canada at every province, so usually every main city, and there were many events. So U of M really scored well on that.
Great.
Thousands and thousands of people come.
Thank you very much. Now, since I made the offer to Judy, I said, you know, a t-shirt or a joke. She said she didn't want the t-shirt, so obviously she wanted a joke, which got my mind thinking. So do you know how to tell the difference between a black bear and a grizzly bear? It's real easy. Okay, so you see the bear. Find a tree. Climb the tree. If it follows you up, black bear. Pushes it over, grizzly. See? We try to cover all the sciences. Oh, sorry, another question. Go ahead, Stan. Yes, I will commit to be out there because the person who was supposed to is going to be unable. And that's mostly because, again, a new member brought it to me and said there was 5 people said they were going. And then there was 12 others interested. So I will commit to be there. Excellent. That's good because I'm on call and I never know when I get called. Hopefully I don't get calls. Okay. So members night will be on, which was going to happen here in just a second. Just a reminder for members, if you should have always, when you sign up, you should get an invitation to join the groups.io or you're automatically registered. That's our primary means of communicating with you. In there, if there's something that we want from council to let you know, for instance, the AGM, that's how we communicate to the entire group. What you can do is go in there, there's subgroups. So like Spruce Woods Star Party's in there, imaging, a few other different ones, general astronomy discussion groups. You go in and pick the ones you want, and that's the only email you'll get from that group, unless there's something that we have to, like the monthly meetings, we announce through that. But as a council, we try to restrict the all-out email. So in theory, you should get 1, maybe 2 emails max, unless you join one of the other groups. So just so you know, that's how it works in groups.io. Yes, sorry?
Mention that
Astronomy Day. I forget. Which day? May? May 18th. Yeah, it was May. That's why I don't have it in mind. So May 18th, we'll be looking for volunteers for Astronomy Day. More details to follow. I believe we're looking at doing it in Assiniboine Park is our plan at this point. And it'll be an all-day event, so we'll be looking for volunteers to help come throughout the different times of the day. More information will be shared at the next meeting. Oh, look at that. Members observing night. I put 7 o'clock. Does that work for you? 7 o'clock at Glenlee. Members observing night. As I mentioned in the AGM and my president's report, we've committed to have somebody there. So at the very least, even if it's overcast, can all shoot the breeze. For any new members, we have coffee and water and tea and stuff out there. If depending on who's hosting, if they know how to use the big scope, you can ask and they can show you how to use the big scope. And or you may come out and not sure how to use a piece of your equipment. And if the host is able to, they'll assist you in whatever way they are. Or at the very least, we just shoot the breeze underneath the stars. And if you're a new member and don't know, we actually have a warm room that's heated, so it's quite comfortable depending on the weather. Yes, Mike.
You know if the road's gonna plow.
I don't know, Michelle. No, you wouldn't know yet. We're just wondering if anybody knows whether the road's been plowed. Okay. Didn't look plowed. So we'll have to wait and see to confirm that. So, but at this point, member night's on. Thank you for the update on what you saw. Next, I would like to introduce Brian Stack to come and talk to us about what's up. Please welcome Brian Stack.
Oh, wait. Sorry, I got that backwards. Standings. Make it. All right. Hope you guys can hear me. Thank you. Oh, get the laser pointer. I might need it. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so let's find out what's going on with March. There's quite a few things going on. I did find a new comet. There might be two, but this comet might be visible during the eclipse, but I'll talk more about it later. So there we go. First off, I'll talk about a little bit about the planets. Do I have to be in the camera view? So the only real visible planet is going to be basically visible. It's going to be Jupiter. But it's going to set relatively easy. The other planets are just pretty much, they're only daytime. So yeah, Jupiter will be the only planet visible. For the March events, again, I pulled out the moon, and I'm going to save it for the next slide. So we do have, this is today, March 8th. Mars will be 4 degrees north of the moon, and Venus will be 3 degrees north of the moon. Of course, I'll mention about the daylight savings time that began this weekend, so we lose an hour. March the 14th, I think that's a pretty big event for it. I'll explain a little bit more about it in detail, especially with M45, the Pleiades. I do have here on March 14th as well. We have the March equinox that's happening on March the 20th. And of course, Venus would be only 0.3 degrees north of Saturn. And of course, we have the zodiacal lights that's happening March 27th. I'll touch a little bit about it, but what's nice about it is happening in the evening, right after sunset. If you haven't seen it, I do have a picture of it, and I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, for the phases of the moon, and it is members night, so the new moon is this Sunday, and then 2 weeks after that, we'll have the full moon. So it kind of works out for this weekend for the observatory or for the members night. Now, okay, so this is interesting. So we do have, of course, this is tomorrow. I think I've listed. We do have Orion constellation with M42. We have the Pleiades and the moon. Oh, sorry, this is supposed to be March 14th, not tomorrow. Uranus and Jupiter. We do have a new comet that I'm going to explain a little bit more about it later. But so the moon is really, really close. And let's see if this works. If I can lock on here. Okay, we're locked and we'll blow it up. You can see it's really close. The moon's going to be right next to the Pleiades or M45. Okay, so this comet I discovered, It's currently the magnitude is only really 7.5. It says here 6.9, but it's actually 7. Someone did take a picture 3 days ago. If you have a look at the Facebook account, so it is visible. According to my information, it's supposed to be visible through the binoculars, but it's going to get brighter by the time April rolls around. So I have made a note here on April the 6th. That's the closest approach it's going to make. The magnitude is going to be 4.5. Those people are going to be at the total eclipse of it, should be visible during the day. So that'll be interesting. So when the eclipse happens, you'll be able to see a comet too. But of course, comets' brightness is not always predictable. Okay, so I did mention about the statical lights there. As you can see here, that is a roughly a large kind of pyramid shape here. It's about as bright as the Milky Way. If you haven't seen it, try and go out for it. It's really nice to see. I do remember Stan and Jay that took me out in Arizona one time, and I was able to see it. Took me a while to catch on to it, and then I caught on to it. So it's just basically it follows the path of the sun there. All right, so as I mentioned before, we have the March equinox there. You can see we'll have equal day and night. So that occurs on March the 20th at 4:24 p.m. Now, what about the weather? You're probably asking about that. Again, this weekend is going to be relatively cold. I did look at the forecast before, and it looks like it is going to be clear tomorrow night. But the weather keeps changing, so yeah.
Tell us something new, brother.
Okay, I have another possibility since you brought that up. I have another reason why we get this cloudiness is because people are buying telescopes. So it's a tradition that happened years ago where, you know, someone bought a telescope and you get cloudy days for the next 3 weeks. All right. Okay. So again, this is the cloud coverage. This changed again. So this, again, it shows here, right here, it just shows a little bit clear, but then it actually, on the new report there, it shows this being actually clear. And we do have a few days. I try to look at several different models to see if we can get something a little different. But here's another look at for the 16-day forecast using the same model. It's going to get cold, then during the week it'll get warm, and then it'll dip again on the weekends. Again, it's going to dip, it's going to get cold again. The forecast was supposed to be minus 15 or so, minus 20 with the wind chill. It might be 25 tomorrow on Saturday. So again, the cloud coverage here, it's all over the map. So we might have a few days of clear skies. All right, here's an easier way of looking at it again. It's going to be mostly cloudy to partly cloudy skies for the next couple of weeks. We do have a clear skies again. Additional on this model being clear tomorrow night. And then we do have another clear night next weekend. So again, hopefully, you know, we have some clear skies. Now here's for the whole month of it. And this time I actually have the phases of the moon. So again, it's going to get kind of cold, but then it's going to warm up. I think, does it show here? Yeah. So next week, we're looking at +6. So it's going to get really warm. It's going to melt the snow. And so much for cross-country skiing. So anyways, now I'm going to talk a little about the solar eclipse. For here, it's going to be a partial eclipse. This is the path of it. As you can see here, it just skims Canada. Now, this is where Winnipeg, that's where we are right now. So what's interesting about this eclipse is I looked at the times for it. Now, up here in Canada, we're only going to see roughly, I think I looked at it 1.5 minutes to 2.5 minutes is the totality of it. That's the length of the time here for Canada. Toronto only gets actually 99% of it, so it's not a total eclipse there. So Mazatlin, I know some of you guys are going out there. You're spending, what, $400 a night, apparently? Wow. Okay, but what's nice down there is, and there's 2 points I want to make here. One, the duration of it is 4 minutes and 20 seconds. Other areas is about 4.5 minutes. So that's pretty good. The other point I want to make is the cloud coverage, which is actually down here covered up. Can I move this?
Yeah, you can drag that part.
Please, God. Okay, that worked. Okay, so the average cloud coverage, and that's why most people are going there, especially for the more experienced astronomer, the cloud coverage is going to be 28%. So you got a really good chance of actually having clear skies. I know some of them are going to be close to the beach. So anyways, good luck for you guys. Now, let's talk about Winnipeg. Get this. There we go. Okay, so it's only going to be a partial eclipse here in Winnipeg. I have here is only covering about 53% of it. It begins roughly just before 1 o'clock on April 8th. I did take time off, so I'm going to be attending it. Of course, the maximum is at around just a little over 2 o'clock. And of course, the cloud coverage for us, and I looked at a couple models, and I'll get into a little deeper, where we're looking at 61%. So in reality, it's going to look like it's going to be partly cloudy to mostly cloudy, but that's no guaranteed. I did look at another model in April. It shows being sunny that day. But here's another model here. We fall. This is April 8th, right about here. So it's going to be mostly cloudy for us. That's just a forecast, but we don't know until we actually get there. This is based on historical data since the year 2000. So we'll just hope, but that's not the end. So last year we did have the partial solar eclipse, and I managed to take a picture of this. Pretty good. It was featured on CBC website, so I took credit for that. So yeah, so this is again about 50% of it, and who knows? It'll still be a good day. I still enjoy being out there. I'm glad I showed up because I was able to take a picture, and thanks to Scott. He said, you know, was it Jacob Cobb? The CBC reporter said, yeah, you want some photographs? Come see me. So that was nice of Scott. So anyways, now I do talk about a little bit of daylight saving time. It's March the 10th. It's going to happen this weekend. So around 2 o'clock in the morning, you'll see your clock jumped up to 3 o'clock. I am going out that night, so I will be cutting it short. But anyways, I want to get out tomorrow night. And of course, modern day stuff has happened. Again, phones, computers, it's done automatically. So we don't have to worry about other than your clock on your oven or your microwave oven. So that's the only thing you really have to worry about. So that's all I have to say. So that's what's up for March 2024. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And for our next speaker to talk about what's new, Dr. Michelle Boyce. Please welcome Michelle.
Is that working?
Mm-hmm.
People can hear me? Okay. Usually I mess up with this, but. Okay, there were a bunch of topics I wanted to cover, but I only got this one, so it'll be pretty short, but I thought it was interesting. Anyone recognize the picture? Okay. So one of these days I'm going to look at all the probes in the solar system. There's just literally hundreds of them. But I found this interesting map. It's not quite complete, but I thought it was worth looking at because, you know, we're going back to the moon to live there. Hopefully, we'll see. Because there's ice and then there are poles. So maybe we can make fuel and so forth. But we can see here's all the Russian missions. I think quite a few of them crashed into the surface, if I recall. And then we have the Apollo, and you can see China, Russia up there, and then we have India, and I think it's missing number 2, and then we have Japan also, which is slim, and then China has one on the backside. This diagram I found it's not complete, so I found this other diagram here, and so this is where Odysseus landed. I think I've probably got some spelling errors in my slides, but that's probably not par for the course. And then we have Chandra 2, 2019, and then Japan. So just this year we have two probes. So this is just a quick trajectory of the probe or the planned landing. I guess the Mars, they've had quite a few crashes there, but at least they have an atmosphere to help them here. The problem with the moon has non-uniform gravity, and also there's no atmosphere to slow you down, so it's all under propulsion, although the gravity is a lot less, so you would think it'd be easier. But this is the planned landing. I tried to dig up some stuff on the payload. There's actually an incredible amount of stuff on this thing. Most of it you could almost summarize as exploring different technologies to help future moon landings. So for instance, we have LRA, a laser retroreflector array. Does anyone know what a retroreflector is? So what's on the moon right now? They actually have retroreflectors. So you can, yeah, so anyone watch Big Bang Theory where they had a roof party? Anyway, so the idea there is that if you have a craft coming in, it could use the retroreflectors on the ground to help navigate. So that's part of the navigation. Then they have a NDL, which is a navigation Doppler radar for surface telemetry. So I believe that's what failed on the lander. But I believe there was another, I didn't find it in my list, but there should be another, there was another payload, I think, with the LiDAR or some kind of radar. Does anyone know what they found?
They used the LRA.
Really? Okay.
They used an experimental laser that NASA had put on board when the original navigation device was created.
Okay, must be the LAR because it has a, okay. Yeah, that could be it then. I was trying to dig around to find that specific piece of information. Okay, so let's just quickly, there's another one up here called ROLSUS, which basically, the dust on the moon is very electrostatic. It gets everywhere, and it's sort of a study of the dust for design of future space suits and spacecrafts. And that's another one, rocket regolith interaction studies. So when the rocket lands, it again the dust. So they want to study that to see if there's ways. So this is all technology about making better moon landings. I thought this radio frequency mass gauge was interesting because if you have a fuel tank and you fill it in zero gravity, what happens is it doesn't fill like on Earth. The walls fill, and it kind of goes towards the middle. So there's some interesting physics for fluids in zero gravity. So this is sort of tries to measure the density to give a sense of how much fuel is there. And then there's S-band radio beacons. So I guess if they get enough landers there, then they can have like beacons to help other landers come in, like for landing aircraft, you know, like that kind of guidance system. Then there's an interesting one here. There's a International Lunar Observatory. So I think there's plans in the works to have an observatory at the South Pole. And this is just a demonstrator. It has 2 cameras and it's supposed to image the center of the galaxy, although not sure how it's going to do that now, but and then there's this Eagle Cam, which apparently was supposed to spring off at 30 meters above the surface and film the rocket as it landed. And then Columbia Sportswear was making this thermal protection shield, which is actually you can actually see it on part of the front. And that's to help protect cryo tanks and stuff like that. So quite a bit of stuff. Most of it's sort of pre-technology and investigations for other satellite designs. What I also found interesting was this 3D printed main engine. So I don't know of any successful 3D printed engines. I know there's one company that's actually 3D printing rockets, but they haven't gotten off the ground yet, but they seem to be doing quite well. Okay.
Excuse me.
Yes. you know whether or not
Every remote don't count actually function.
I don't think so. I didn't, I mean, I'm not finding a lot online. Does anyone know?
This works.
I might, maybe one of the images I have, but I don't think, I do have an image of the landing jets, but I thought it was coming from the ship itself. It's interesting these days, websites in the news, it's like a couple of lines of text and then ads. So you kind of have to dig. It's hard to find, it's getting harder and harder to find more technical information. In this case, I guess they don't really want to advertise too much because it landed on its side. And what that means is that it couldn't properly transmit all the data. And I think they shut it down and they're going to try restarting again once the sun has come into view. So I don't know. It's the short answer. This is just a comparison with the lunar lander. So just to give you a comparison of the size, give you a sense. And then all I have is, that was the bulk of my research. So this is it approaching. And this is the picture of the landing. So this is when it landed and the rocket engine was still firing and all that dust. That I thought was caught by the onboard cameras, but that might have been the actual camera that shut off. I don't know. I don't think it was. And this is it on its side. I kind of distorted the image, but it's like looking down at the surface. It's tilted over onto its side. And here's a picture of from the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. It actually, you can see it picked it off there. You can clearly see it's on its side. No. I had the name of the crater that it landed at, but it's insignificant name. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Is Dr. Beer in there? Yeah. So, Dr. Buey, are you prepared to start your session early? Oh, there he is.
Sure.
So I'll just introduce you if that's okay. And I'd like to welcome you to the RASC Winnipeg Center. And Dr. Mark Buey is a graduate of the Lunar and Planetary Laboratory at the University of Arizona in 1984. And Dr. Buey was a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Hawaii, then worked at the Space Telescope Science Institute, moved on to the Lowell Observatory, and now works at the Southwest Research Institute in Boulder, Colorado. Formerly, he worked at the Lowell Observatory in Flagstaff, Arizona, and was a Sentinel Space Telescope mission scientist for the B612 Foundation, which is dedicated to protecting Earth from asteroid impact events. Please welcome Dr. Mark Buey.
Well, it's good to be talking to you. I can't see too many people in the video, so I'm hoping everybody can see me just fine. I'm going to switch over and share my screen. Let's see. Can you see the screen okay?
Yes, we can. That's great.
All right. Well, my sincere apologies for all the technical glitches last time I tried to do this talk. As you may remember, I was trying to watch the annular eclipse, and I drove to the closest spot from home, which happened to be Albuquerque, New Mexico. And boy, all the hotels were filled up, and I ended up in a really deadbeat hotel with terrible internet. That's what did me in on that one. But here today, I'm working from home, and this should work out a little bit better. I thank you for your patience to ultimately get this message. I wish I had better news to share. I just got back from Mexico on a big campaign. And we had 50 telescopes deployed in Baja California. And that included about 50 observers from the United States and 100 observers from Mexico, most of them students, college students. And everybody did a great job, but the weather let us down. Out of 50 deployed stations, we managed to get one light curve, and it was outside of the shadow, so there was no signal to be seen there. But the subject of tonight's talk is about occultations. This is something that I've been working on since graduate school. And it used to be a very, very difficult, hard undertaking. And it's still not the easiest thing in the world to do. But thanks to the amazing catalog from the European Space Agency's mission called Gaia, we now have ultra precise measurements of the positions, distances, and sky plane motion of all the stars in our galaxy down to 20th magnitude, which is far fainter than anything I care about for doing occultations. And what this has done is opened up the entire solar system to investigation through occultations. There's a lot of interesting stuff to dig into here and talk about, and I'm kind of hoping that everybody understands what occultations are. I'm not really going to go talk in too much detail about that, but I'm going to start talking about some of the nuts and bolts about what is important about occultations and where these endeavors are taking me now in terms of exploring the solar system and also tracing back this information to the formation of the solar system. So the understanding here is, this is all really kind of kicked off by studying the Kuiper Belt of all places. When the first Kuiper Belt object was discovered in 1991, it opened up a whole new arena of study in the solar system. And through just looking at the dynamical structure of these objects in the outer solar system, we've learned a lot about how our solar system came to be. And I'm not going to talk about a lot of those details, but one of the things that has stood out is that there's a structure in the outer solar system that roughly sits between roughly 38 astronomical units out to 50 astronomical units. And this is called the cold classical Kuiper Belt. What makes these objects special is that they are in very nearly circular orbits, and they are in the plane of the solar system. And they're very tightly confined. Now, there's lots of other Kuiper Belt objects out there that are what we call excited orbits. But it's these cold classicals that are the focus of my interests and a lot of other people in planetary science. The thing is, when you make these things, you're forming out of a disk of gas and dust in the early solar system. And because of those dynamics, everything collapses down into a plane. And that's how you end up with this. At the very beginning, everything is in a plane. Then, as time goes on and you have big objects, Jupiter, Saturn, and other things, they kind of stir things up. And then they raise the inclinations away from the plane. They change the eccentricities, and they make them excited. And after you remove the gas and dust from the system, we don't know of any way to put them back into this cold, flat disk-like structure. As a result, we know by looking at these objects that these bodies have been where they are for the entire age of the solar system after their formation. So they're the oldest, best preserved fossil records of the original solar system. Now, generally speaking, you think of being out at 40 to 50 AU as being pretty inaccessible region. But occultations give us the means to study these small bodies in the outer solar system that otherwise you would need to fly there with a spacecraft, as with the New Horizons spacecraft did. And in the upper right-hand corner, as a reminder throughout the talk, this is a picture of the Kuiper Belt object known as Arakoth that I was fortunate enough to discover with the Hubble Space Telescope in time for New Horizons to fly by it and take these pictures. One of the things that you can't tell by looking at this picture here is you're actually looking face on to something that's more like a pancake or a hamburger shape rather than a sphere. And that was quite an exciting surprise to get from that occultation. But this object is only about 30 kilometers across, and it's, in terms of resolved imaging and knowing that you have this interesting structure of two things stuck together, there is no tool that we have for direct imaging or any other means to know that we have an assemblage like this, except through occultations. It gives us these kilometer scale investigations and allows us to know the existence in the population of tight and contact binaries. And by looking at the edges of these objects, you can get some clues as to how much collisional evolution, as a crater, if it hits on the edge of the object and you look at it with an occultation, you might see a divot cut out of it. We see this all the time with the main belt asteroids. We can use the occultations to also understand the collisional history of these outer solar system objects. One of the things that I am looking at, and kind of in the long term, is the construction of things like observatories, and I put it in quotes here because it's not a single telescope that we're used to studying objects. It's a lot more like, say, the Atacama Large Millimeter Array Telescope, ALMA, that has a very, very large structure of individual apertures that together work as a single system. And for doing occultations, that's exactly what we need to do. We need to spread out our telescopes across the shadow path for an occultation. And the spatial resolution we get depends on how many stations we can put out and what's the spacing between those stations. One of the keys to making this work turns out to be involvement from community scientists. You've heard the term citizen science. That's still pretty common. I don't particularly like that term. I think there are peoples that can feel like they're being marginalized when you talk about it in terms of citizen science. But community science, I think, is a better term for being a little bit more inclusive. I want to get everybody involved, and I've taken this traveling show of telescopes and chasing occultations to many places on Earth: Senegal, South America, South Africa, Europe, Australia. We've been all over the place, and I always try to include locals. And you might be surprised to know that a small fraction of the people that are involved in these campaigns are actually professional scientists of any kind, let alone astronomers. So let me just delve into a couple of quick things about Arakoth. I'm going to go kind of fast through this, but from the very beginning, even before the Pluto mission, New Horizons, was built, the planetary science community was convinced that you know, as important as Pluto was to study, the Kuiper Belt and the cold classical objects, these small bodies, were even more important. And the fact that Pluto, we could do Pluto with New Horizons, we got a guaranteed spectacular result, and we knew that we were going to be flying right through the center of this cold classical population. And unfortunately, as luck would have it, the area where Pluto was, and thus where New Horizons is flying to, and is a region that is the background of this region, if you're looking at it with a telescope, happens to be at very, very low galactic latitude near the galactic center. And that meant that we were looking for very faint, distant, slow-moving objects against incredibly crowded stellar fields. I was involved with a project, one of the earliest surveys for finding Kuiper Belt objects, called the Deep Ecliptic Survey. And I remember the night that I made the mistake of pointing the telescope in a search field that was too close to the galactic center, and it all but killed my computers. It was just so much processing power to take care of those data at that time. This was around the turn of the century, that I swore I would never go anywhere near that region again. That's why we didn't know about an object that New Horizons could fly to. We need to search in these very, very dense, crowded regions. And I actually started this search project in 2004. And just to let you know, on Monday this week, I finally submitted a paper summarizing all of that work leading up to the discovery of Arakoth. Was submitted to the Planetary Science Journal after 20 years of effort. I think that holds the record now for the longest gestation period for any project I've ever worked on. But even though it was a long time, there was a lot of work to do to learn how to find these things. And we only had 5 years from the time when we actually discovered it to encounter, but we needed an orbit. And typically you like to have decades worth of data on an object before you send a spacecraft there. Well, the occultations came to the rescue. Not only were we able to get sizes and shapes, but we were also able to get accurate positions for Arakoth. And this was one of the key things that helped with the success and the results that we got from the New Horizons mission. But most importantly, this is one of my early raw plots that I generated, very first one that showed the occultation data. Each one of these lines represents the region of sky and space around the object that was probed by each telescope. And the magenta dots there indicate when the star disappeared and then later reappeared. And you can see there were 5 stations there where the star was seen to disappear. And in the others, we didn't see anything. When I saw this picture, my immediate reaction to this was, we are looking at a contact binary, an object that are basically 2 spheres stuck to each other. It took a while to actually prove that. And this is kind of the roll-up result from all of the campaigns that we did. The first one in the upper left was a miss. You can see this red line at the bottom. That was our closest station that just missed hitting the object by only about 15 kilometers. Then the second one on 27 July 10, we saw that from the stratospheric observatory known as Sophia. And at the time, we didn't know whether we had kind of clipped the bottom of the object, or maybe we could have clipped the top of the object. But I think in hindsight, looking back on it, we actually just barely nicked the bottom of the object. But the other curve that I showed you already, that is the one in the lower left. And what's shown there is the shape model from the New Horizons data superimposed on there. And you can see the relatively good agreement between that. And then we had the last observation that was actually in Senegal. But the fact is that with occultations, we were able to determine an object at 43 astronomical units was a contact binary. And this is actually the first contact binary that's ever really been known. I know that people talk a lot about comets being contact binaries, but I think they are so battered and bruised and eroded and modified from their outgassing near the sun that you just really don't know exactly what the original shape was. And here's a case of something that we believe has not been modified for the entire age of the solar system. And here you have the shape. Now, this has stands to be one of my favorite images taken by any spacecraft at any time. I could just stare at this forever. And we can learn so much from this. One of the key factors is the two parts of the body merged. It was a very slow and gentle merger, so there isn't a lot of distortion and damage from the collision, and that fact right there throws out about 90% of the models that people would come up with for how the solar system forms. And this has had a very strong effect on models and theories for how the solar system formed, and I think that's going to continue going forward. And so given that we have New Horizons that looked up close, and we have an occultation that gave us information to start out with, we realize you can actually use this as a test case and applied to other objects. If we go out there with an occultation, we can now interpret other occultation observations through the lens of what we've learned with New Horizons. I'm going to skip over this next bit because I think I've already covered these points. But one of the things that I want to do in terms of understanding the solar system formation is answering some basic questions. One, how common are contact binaries? Are they all contact binaries, or is it 10%? These are important numbers that will constrain the models. If you come up with a model that it makes it really, really hard to come up with contact binaries, and yet they're very common, then you're going to doubt that model and look for something better. This oblate shape that Arakoth has is unique. I'll talk about this more in a bit, but how common are those? And it seems like the only way to make those oblate shapes is just as things were in a disk with a cold circular and low inclination orbits. We think that the fact that you have disk-shaped objects is also directly related to things that are made from accretion. And you cannot make that kind of a shape with collisions. I would like to know, is there a size limit? Is Arakoth the biggest of these kind of objects, or is it the smallest, or is it in the middle? How big do they get? You might think these are pretty tough questions to answer, but again, as you're probably guessing, occultations play a very strong role in this. So let me just give you a couple of quick takeaway points about what you can and can't do with occultations. Now notice that the limb profile that you get from watching the stars appear and disappear, you get a two-dimensional shape projection of the object. And that shape is projected on the surface of the Earth and one-to-one. So if it's a 10-kilometer object in diameter, then you have to cover a region on the Earth that's 10 kilometers across. And that's a big reason why most of the early measurements of using occultations and say even main belt asteroids was going after the really big ones because that made it easier to find them and measure the occultations. You can actually measure the center of the object very, very well. if you could trust that all objects were spherical or elliptical, you could actually do a crazy good job on measuring the position. So it turns out that your ability to measure the center of a body is determined more by what you know or don't know about its shape. And the further away the object is, the harder it is to predict the event, and it's linear. So if you're looking at an object in the main belt and it's only one or a couple astronomical units away, you know, consider that to be a difficulty of 1. You go out to the Kuiper belt and now it's 20, 30, 40 times harder. And that will translate to the realities of how many stations you need. And so just a little bit of math here. You've got the diameter of the object and then the uncertainty of the prediction. And if you want to see it with if you want to get the occultation with a 98% chance of success, that's 3 standard deviations or 3 sigma. And then it's 3 sigma on both sides. So that means the size of the region you have to cover is the diameter of the object plus 6 times the uncertainty in its position. And you divide that by the number of stations you have, and that'll give you the spacing you can get. If your spacing, you know, if you've only got 2 objects, or sorry, 2 stations, and you've got a 100-kilometer object, you're not going to get a whole lot of information, especially if the uncertainty is really big. So all of these play an important role in working out the deployment strategies for these campaigns I've been working on. And just to give you, some of you, I hope, will appreciate these numbers. The scale on the left is milliarc seconds per kilometer. So if you have an object that's 1 kilometer across, that means it subtends the angular size that you see on this graph. So at 10 AU, for instance, a 1 kilometer object would subtend 0.15 milliarc seconds, or 1,000th of an arc second. And that gets into my new favorite unit called microarc seconds, where the Gaia measurements are now down in the 100 to 200 microarc seconds for positional measurements. And as you see, as you get farther and farther out, though, that angular scale gets smaller and smaller and smaller, but the physical scale doesn't change. If you get in the shadow of a 1 kilometer object, you're going to measure the 1 kilometer object, no matter how small its angular scale is. Now, here kind of illustrates why it's so difficult to do the outer solar system. This black line at a diagonal here is a very good uncertainty for an orbit for any object. Okay, 10 milliarc seconds. Most things are not that good. But if you could do it at 10 milliarc seconds, let's say you're at 40 astronomical units, you read off of the graph, and that says that 1 sigma corresponds to just under 300 kilometers. Now, if your object's only 10 kilometers across, that means it's all about the uncertainty. You just don't know where this object is. And with that formula that I was showing before, would tell you that if you want to get an object like that and measure it, it's going to be hundreds of stations. But if you can get that uncertainty down to a lower number, say 0.1, so here we're talking about a factor of 100 better, believe it or not, we can actually do this, but it requires bootstrapping your way through an occultation, because an occultation will actually give you a good measurement. So you say in your first occultation, you put out a really coarse grid, and all you want to do is just get 1 chord on the object. If you do that, you know where the object was. That can increase the precision of your next prediction by a factor of 10. Then you have another campaign where you tighten up the stations and you get a little better resolution. You might get 2 or 3 chords, but then you have a second measurement that will get the uncertainties down another factor of 10. And then your third campaign, you can really get to work and get a profile that looks a lot like the Arakoth profile. Um, Now, for this kind of work, for this really high precision occultation work, there really is no substitute for mobile campaign. You need to go where the shadows are. There are lots of things you could do with robotic observatories that are in fixed locations, but when it comes down to doing that final high precision measurement of the shape of the object, you have to go where the shadow's going to be. There's no way to guarantee you're going to have enough assets. I think for Kuiper Belt objects, I think Arikos still stands as the record, where we had like 4 kilometer spacing between stations and 25 stations out. In Jupiter Trojans, we were looking for a 5 kilometer sized object with an uncertainty of 200 kilometers, and I put out 100 telescopes for that. I'll mention that in a little bit. That's kind of one of the craziest campaigns that we've done so far. But the math kind of works. You kind of slip a digit on the size of the object, but we've done this with near-Earth asteroids, main belt asteroids. We actually got a successful occultation of Apophis, this near-Earth asteroid that's going to come really close in a couple of decades. That object, we had stations that were separated by 80 meters. So it's kind of a fun game to figure out what the strategy and plan is to tackle each one of these things. But the nice thing is, right now, if you have an interest in any object that we know of in the solar system, there is a path to getting occultation data on that object. And that was not true before the Gaia mission came along. So, based on the success of this work that we did with New Horizons, from the very earliest days of the Lucy mission design. Now, Lucy is a mission that is going out to study the Jupiter Trojans. It's got 5 targets that are listed right here. They range from the smallest of Polymele is about 25 kilometers across, and the biggest is the Patroclus Menoetius binary pair. Each one of the components is about 100 kilometers across. They cover a wide range of compositional surface composition, a little bit of a range of albedo, and they inhabit different dynamical components, the dynamical places in the Trojans. So it's a very diverse set that is intended to try to explore the Jupiter Trojans for the first time and kind of figure out where this population has come from. One of the leading theories is that these objects derive from the Kuiper Belt. They were transported inward and captured in the Trojan clouds at the distance of Jupiter, and they've been trapped there ever since. And they would think that they're decoupled from the main belt asteroids. Well, we're going to find out. The nice thing is that the Jupiter Trojans, they're a lot closer. They're only at 5 astronomical units. And so that means that we can very quickly go after and doing these high resolution, detailed occultation investigations. The nice thing was, but as far as the Lucy mission is concerned, I could go out and measure the size of the object so we can get their albedos and decent sizes for mission planning. I get positions that improve the orbits. And as it turns out, that we've actually discovered a new target, a moon around Polymele, with this work. And we can also use these measurements to put limits on the close binaries that could be there. And again, that helps us with mission planning. But we've been learning things about the objects as we go as well. It's not just about those engineering goals, but we are actually learning things about the Jupiter Trojans. So one of the first that we looked at here is an example of one of our better occultations of Lucas. This is sort of intermediate in size out of the population, and you can see how bad a job an ellipse does at fitting the occultation points that we collected on this object. That was quite a surprise on this first one. And we know that this is a fairly elongated world. It's more like a prolate shape, so kind of like a football or a rugby ball in being pointed in one end, and it's rotating. And it's actually fairly slow rotation. There's a lot of mysterious, weird things about this object. But we're seeing topography. If you think that spheres and ellipses are the way objects should be, then departures from that tells you about something that happened to it. And that's not a totally naive suggestion. If you think about Arakoth, which you see in the upper right, if you kind of ignore the details of the surface that you see resolved in those images, you look at the edges and you'll see that the departures from a sphericity or ellipses there is pretty minor. But for Lucas, there is a lot of big things happening there. So this is what from our first occultation, one of our first occultations. This was done down in Texas. And here's another one a few months later. And in fact, if you sit and stare at this, you'll kind of finally figure out just how weird this shape is. And what the common tool for occultation, people that are studying occultation data, and I was in the same camp, everybody's just fitting circles and ellipses to these things and say, okay, we know how big the object is. Now we know its albedo. Okay, we're done. But as I've been was working with Lucas, I was realizing that, this is a really bad way to look at it. So here's another occultation that we had. I think this is our densest set of chords that we have collected on Lucas. But here's what it looks like when I've developed a new tool that tries to draw the edge of the object. And this is actually kind of tricky. I'm not going to really get into the details of it, but the idea is to draw a smooth line through all the data points that also do not violate any constraints. And so you might think, well, I'm just making it up with the one in the lower left-hand corner. You see that it kind of looks more like a kidney bean or something like that. Let me go back to that. And you see here that we only have 4 chords. But if you look at this and you look at A02, there's a really short chord, and A03 is a really long chord. That means the edge of the object cannot be like the ellipse. If it was, that short chord wouldn't exist. It would be a really long chord. That means that the limb has to go out past A02, but it can't cross the A01 line, and has to cut back in, but it can't cross A03 until way out to the lower right. So if you imagine that this edge that I've drawn here is actually constrained by the data, even though there's no data points there. It's constrained by the negative observations. This is actually one of the harder things that it's been for me to get across to people that want to do occultations. Everybody wants to be on the center line because everybody wants to see the star disappear. But sometimes the most scientifically important observation is the one where the star doesn't disappear. And I need stations there too. And with doing these coordinated campaigns like I've been doing, it's worked out pretty well to be able to get those extra constraints. When you are leaving it up to the amateur community to just self-organize, you end up with something that's a little bit more like this, where we have a big clump of stuff right in the middle, and then you see the outer edges where it's very gappy. This is a case where I put my observatories in a regular grid across the entire region that I needed to cover. And then everybody else that wanted to observe it was all piling up on the middle. And this continues to be a problem to try to find ways to motivate people to do good science, not just observe phenomena. So here's a couple of examples for Euripides and Orus. There's some long stories here too, which I don't have time to go into here today. But one of the lessons that I'm learning from this is that all of these objects, all 5 of the targets that Lucy's going to go visit, they are all significantly more battered and bruised than Arakoth. And that kind of fits with current theories, but I want to see these pictures up close, look at the geology and find out where this stuff came from. Is it all just, is it collisions, or is there something else going on there? And this is going to give us a new witness plate set of observations from which to understand a larger population of objects by taking the ultimate results from the mission, comparing it to the detailed occultation data, and then going off and doing other occultations of things that we're not spending spacecraft to, and learning even more about these populations. Now, Polymele, that's as I said before, this is the smallest of the Lucy targets, and it turns out to be similar in size to Arakoth. It has a very difficult to measure light curve, and thus the rotation period was hard to determine. We think we're looking at it mostly equator on. And this one was definitely the most difficult of all 5 targets to measure. So we ended up with a couple of early measurements. This one on the left, we got a single cord. This was from Senegal. You'll notice the date there. This was right in the middle of the lockdown during the pandemic. For this one, I bought 19 Skywatcher 8 telescopes and shipped the telescopes plus all the equipment to Senegal to my colleagues there that went out and with locals, since very few people could travel. I sent them the equipment so that they could make the measurement. The reason they only have one cord is because it was cloudy or rainy for all the others. But as luck would have it, they actually measured it at its longest dimension. But at the time, we thought, oh, this was looking at it, it's a circular object. We didn't know it was elliptical as it's drawn here. So we totally got the wrong idea. Then a year later, we were in Spain making another measurement here, and we managed to get these 3 measurements. And there is no way to reconcile those 2 measurements with what we thought we knew. It's too small in 21 compared to the size for 2020, because we know it doesn't have a light curve. And these shapes that you see right here would imply a big modulation as Polymele rotates. So we finally went out and we made another measurement 6 months later, March of 2022. And you see really just a beautiful profile of the object. And I think to this day, that's our best profile that we have of Polymele. This is a weird shape, all sorts of strange things going on here. But you'll notice that if you kind of ignore the topography, it looks elliptical. And from the light curve, it cannot be elliptical, which to me proved that this object is a disc-shaped object. So as it rotates, it has the same profile because you're looking at a disc edge on. And most of the people on the science team believed me, but they were very happy to see, let me just skip ahead to this time step showing that whenever we look at it, it basically looks like an ellipse of the same aspect ratio. And that made everybody happy. And they now believe that it really is a disc. So now we've discovered the second one of these oblate disc-shaped objects in the solar system. Now let me go back, and we got a surprise in that occultation. If you notice here, it says George and Cobble. those two observers saw a dip in their light curve. And you'll notice this is around minus 200 kilometers in the x-axis. You go back to this one in the upper right, it's the same event, and you see George and Cobble down here, which missed Pullemele, and Pullemele is near zero, but 200 kilometers away, they see these two chords where it dropped out. And that is a moon that we discovered around Pullemele. And this one we've searched with the Hubble Space Telescope to get to look for satellites, and this one is too small and too close to Pullemele to be seen with the Hubble Space Telescope. So had we not done the occultation work, we wouldn't have known about this, and we might have gotten some good data, but now we know, and we can design a observing sequence to go and observe this object. Based on this first measurement, if we assume that it's in an equatorial orbit, the dotted line here represents the projected orbit. And you can see over here on the right, there's the small circle. That's where Sean, the satellite, is. And then Pullemele's on the inside. So you can just get a sense for the scale. We got incredibly lucky on that. Each one of these lines represents a telescope that was deployed. If Pullemele had just been another 10 kilometers further south, it would have been in an area we weren't covering and we wouldn't have seen it. So we've been working to try to find it again. August 26th, we observed and we didn't see it. The chances were about 8% that we would have found it there. So when it came time for February last year, the goal was to find Sean again. And this was the biggest campaign that I've ever put together. I put 100 telescopes out. We basically covered the entire state of Kansas at 2-kilometer resolution. So that we could get two chords on Sean. We didn't do quite as good a job on Pullemele because we needed to use all our telescopes looking for Sean. But even so, this is just a weird shape. And this is not software gone wrong. This curve, this line that you see here is consistent with all the data. This down here, Lucy 79, there was a double hit. Let's see, it disappeared, reappeared, disappeared, reappeared. Up here at T04, we saw it. Yeah, there's actually something wrong with this figure right here. I'm going to have to go check that out. I believe that's supposed to be there, but this is an early version. So it was disappeared, reappeared, disappeared, reappeared, and several of these stations saw that. So it's clearly a really wacky shape, and it'll be great to see it when we get there with Lucy. So this is the detection we got of Sean. We did recover it with a single station, and it was pretty much where, I didn't know where in the orbit it was, but I know where the orbit would be, and it was pretty much where I expected it. And so here's the coverage pattern that we had for this. You can see how much further we spread out our stations, and where the green arrow is pointing is right where we found Sean this time. Now, we really wanted a third detection because, and there's a long story there too. We've got constraints on the orbit. And if we just get one more measurement, that will pin down the orbit. We'll know the mass, we'll know the density, we'll know a lot of things about the object. And that was the campaign that we just had in Mexico, where we had 50 stations, and we put a lot of effort into figuring out where to put those stations. And in the end, it was just cloudy. So we're going to have to finish this job with Lucy, unfortunately. But one of the key takeaway points from this is that Pullemele and Sean, as a pair of objects, they are twins of Arakoth, almost. The only difference is the two bodies aren't stuck together like they are for Arakoth. Polemele, the primary object's about the same size and shape and as the large lobe of Arakoth. Sean, the satellite, is pretty close to the same size and shape as the small lobe on Arakoth. This highly oblate shape, I think it's a case where, in the case of Arakoth, the two bodies merged. In the case of Polemele and Sean, they formed in the same way, but for whatever reason, they never got close enough together to stick to each other. The shape is more complicated than Arakoth. I think it's reasonable to expect that that is due to the collisional history of the Jupiter Trojans, which is higher collision rate than the Kuiper Belt, but much lower than the main belt. So it's a good story, but it's nice to knowing that we're going to get the answers to this with the flyby. Okay, and we've got a good plan. We had already worked a plan for recovery with the spacecraft in case it was clouded out, and it's going to be tight, but we think we have the ability to take pictures, detect it, make the positional measurements, work out the orbit, and feed that back in, tell the spacecraft where to look. Because what we all want to see is super high resolution pictures of Sean so that we can see, is this a collisional shard, something from some cataclysmic event in the past for this body, or does it look like a primordial object, something that could only be related to the original formation scenario. So the last of the objects, and I'm bringing this one up now because we've basically got one more massive campaign to run for Lucy. Patroclus Minoicius is a binary system. They're both about 100 kilometers across. What makes this one really exciting is that from what we know of the cold classical Kuiper Belt, objects are binary with the properties that we see of Patroclus and Minoicius in terms of the separation between the bodies, the size of the bodies, the orbit periods, everything that we know from the Kuiper Belt. Patroclus is a dead ringer for that. And it's one of those first signs that we had with the Jupiter Trojans that there was this genetic link between the Kuiper Belt and the Jupiter Trojans. So when I first heard about the target list for Lucy, I thought Patroclus was going to steal the show, and we'd have to wait for 2033 when we fly by to get the answer. But now I think it's going to be a second in line behind Polemele. But we've already done a lot of occultations of Patroclus. We know that there's large-scale topographic features on these bodies. We've been able to measure the ratio of the masses of the two bodies, which was actually a mission goal. So we're actually beating the mission on this particular one. And also with the occultations, we're going to be able to fill in the backside of these objects and the winter pole, because when Lucy gets there, it's going to be actually at solstice for this object, and so there will be a pretty good chunk of one hemisphere that we won't be able to see with direct imaging just because it won't be illuminated. So this August, there's going to be an occultation, and it's mostly visible from the southwestern United States, New Mexico, Texas, on up into Colorado and Oklahoma. The shadow goes on up even well into Canada, but by then the sun is up. So you have to be down in the southern United States. I'm planning to put out 100 telescopes for this, 50 on each object, with a spacing of about 2 kilometers between sites. And the whole goal for this is to constrain the polar dimension of both bodies. In August this coming year, we're basically looking at Patroclus equator on, And so it will have the minimum projected size. And that's a geometry that we won't get with Lucy, because Lucy will be at the solstice. It will have the maximum opening angle, and it will be harder for it to measure that polar dimension. Here's a couple of example profiles. This is our best to date. This was done in Australia, and for a campaign where we had 12 stations, and with a couple of extras from Australians added into this. And the shadows were such that almost every station got to see both objects. And so that gave us a lot more chords than we otherwise would have gotten. And you can see how these things really don't match spheres or ellipses very well. And this has completely transformed my thinking about these bodies. Just for reference, if you look at the left curve and look at the general spacing between the lines here, for the campaign that's coming up, we will have about 2.5 times more chords on the object than you will see here. And so I think it's going to truly be an epic undertaking, and I'm really looking forward to that. So as I was saying, Lucy, to combine with the occultation data and all other ground-based data that we can take, is going to give us a training set from which to understand the detailed geologic history and compositional structure of the Jupiter Trojans from a few cases that we can amplify through other observations and learn more about the populations. And get statistically based constraints, like how much collisional processing areas, what's the similarities and differences between the main belt asteroids and the TNOs. And whenever we find a new satellite, we will be able to get masses and densities for those objects as well. Now, okay, so I'm going to skip over this mobile system thing, because I think you've kind of gotten the idea here that the mobile small telescopes are the key to doing occultations. This is my current inventory. So I've got just right at 100 telescopes here in Colorado. I have another 30 some odd telescopes scattered out of the Recon network in the Western United States. That's been augmented by, I believe it's about 8 stations in British Columbia. And we're in talks with colleagues in Mexico about adding another 10 to 20 stations down in Baja. But we're using the Recon system with these cameras, and we're going to do sort of fixed location observing and mobile campaigns in the next 3 years. And we are hoping to get sizes and shapes of somewhere between 50 to 100 new Jupiter Trojans to add to the sample. And we've already been running this project for more than 10 years right now. And it's good to get some more funding to keep this project going, because it's been working pretty well. We've had some very, very long-term commitments from people, from teachers, and we have students, rotating through the system all the way through this. Just to give you a scale on this, at this point, not counting Recon, which has been running for 10 years, we're coming close to having involved something like about 800 unique new people in occultations through the Lucy occultation program that we've been doing since 2018. In the Recon project, we've probably impacted somewhere between 300 to 500 people, depending on the depth of impact you're talking about. Put it all together, and we're talking about having involved a new cadre of observers in initiating them into occultation observing that of the order of, say, 1,500 people over this period of time. I was asking in the International Occultation Timing Association, which is a worldwide organization that's all about doing occultations, the current active membership of the worldwide is less than the number of people that we brought into this realm. And I think that's pretty exciting. That's gotten a lot of people involved in science, doing real science at a level. They don't have to end up being scientists downstream, but they certainly learn a much better appreciation for what science is and what it takes to do good work. And I want to try to make that go even further. So I'm going to skip that too. So what I want to get to here in the closing minutes here is that I've been looking at, okay, so is how do we scale this up? And is there value in scaling it up? And if I did, what would it look like? It turns out the cost of equipment is almost negligible for this endeavor. It sounds expensive, but it really is only a small drop in the bucket for what it takes to run these mega campaigns. Also, shipping costs are not as expensive and bad as you might think. Yeah, it's an annoying process. It's an annoying cost because a lot of times we spend as much money moving the equipment from one continent to another. We could have just bought the things in the other continent. Like when we took stuff to Australia, we could have just bought those machines there and left them there, but we're not allowed to do that. What is the thing that costs the most money? So if you just look at the total overall budget, if you're trying to put together some big campaign or program or something like that, is participant support costs. We're talking about travel, lodging, transportation. It's not per person, it's not a crazy number, but when you start talking about putting 100, 200, 300 people in the field to do these detailed measurements, it adds up. At the moment, the only place I can get these kind of budgets comes from spacecraft mission budgets, where it's for mission safety and risk reduction. So it's worth it for them to spend a few $1,000,000 doing some of these campaigns. It's cheap relative to the cost of these really expensive missions. But when you put it up against typical small research grants, it's just the same in Canada as is in the United States and Mexico and pretty much anywhere else in the world. They don't give out big chunks of money to do things like this. It's going to take some work to convince people that it's worth doing this kind of stuff. So I've come up with a design, and this design of this survey that I want to tell you about is meant for shock value. I'm not sure that it's actually practical in my lifetime because of the politics involved. Technically, we could just go do this. So if somebody were to give me the money, I could just go do this. And so I'm going to skip this one and I'm going to go right straight to the killer one here. So what I want to do is a survey of 1,000 cold classical Kuiper Belt objects. I want to know what that population is all about. I figure I've done a point design on this. I figure would give me 10 to 20 years of support with a budget comparable to the budget for Lucy. This would involve 180,000 people as observers. You could repeat that and hit fewer people, but that's how many observers you need to collect that data. You're going to do 3 events per object. We're going to find out about contact binaries, close binaries. We're going to really map out what these objects are. Distributions of sizes, shapes, albedos, rotation poles. It's precise astrometry, so we end up with lots of really ultra precise orbits. So if there's any other unseen masses roaming around in the Kuiper Belt, they would stand out like a sore thumb with this data. But this is a project that is just not practical to do with spacecraft. You could do it. You could send out 1,000 New Horizons spacecraft and get this data, but the expense for that, it would be just ridiculous by comparison. So even though if you say, oh, well, I could do this project for you and it'll only cost you like $300 or $400 million, most people think that's a lot of money, and it is. But if you think about doing it with a spacecraft, instead of it being, New Horizons was close to $1 billion, and you want to do 1,000 of those, now you're, $1 trillion to spend to do this, and I can do it for 300 million. I think that sounds like a pretty good bargain. Now, let me just, yeah. So I just want to leave you with some of these final thoughts. Gaia has opened this door for us, but it's a door that is closing because at some point the mission will end. And at that point, the positional accuracy of the stars will begin to degrade because they're moving around and you just don't have a perfect measurement. And as time goes on, the positions get worse and worse and worse because of the uncertainties in their motions. And what the consequence of that is that you will lose first the outer solar system, and that will work its way back in. Now, the Gaia people are thinking about a Gaia 2, a second mission, and they think it's going to be about 20 years after Gaia 1 finishes. So we're going to have a period of time. Well, right now, we've got the best time we could possibly have for doing occultations. In another 10 or 10, maybe 15 years, it's going to degrade and we're going to lose the outer solar system. So we need to get ready for that. We've also got the Vera Rubin Observatory, which is about to come online. This is going to add a huge number of new Kuiper Belt objects to our sample, and it will be providing really good positions. And these will become candidates for things that we can study. So I want to get a survey like this spun up so that it can take advantage of the data that's going to be coming out of LSST, that survey, together with Gaia before everything erodes and we have to wait for another spacecraft. I like the fact that community science is the way to get this. I like to think about this in terms of, pick a mission, any spacecraft mission that you want to talk about. How many people were directly affected by that mission? Being a member of the New Horizons science team, that's been a fantastic endeavor. I really enjoyed that. A lot of people enjoyed seeing news reports and pictures that show up in textbooks and books and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of people that were directly fundamentally impacted in their lives, the numbers are, maybe it's going to push into 1,000 or 2,000 for a big mission like that. But this particular project that I want to do here, we're talking about just a massive community impact. And I'm hoping that this could be one way to actually get funding for this, by calling upon philanthropic sources and saying, look, we can bring science to your community, whether it's in West Africa or rural South America, you name it. We can bring this in and make a difference all over the world. And it will be a global effort. You cannot do this kind of project without using all the available good spaces on the Earth for doing this kind of stuff. And again, there's no technology to develop here. We know how to do it. We can just go out, and all we have to do is have the desire to go and collect this data. And that's kind of the crusade that I'm kind of starting on, to try to do some writing and educating and, talks like this to let you know that some of the things that we can do if we work together as a community. So I want just a couple of parting pictures. Here's a picture of the team that got the first good Arakoth measurement. A lot of people from Argentina and also from the United States, all working together, common cause here. That was a really amazing experience. Then a year later, this is the team from Senegal, including in white in the very center is actually the current president of Senegal, Macky Sall, who was instrumental in a lot of the support. Also in here, you'll see this person here, Maram Kare. I recommend that if you have access to the NOVA programs, we just recently had a NOVA PBS show that I had a lot to do with, and we filmed in Senegal. The story centers around Maram. The program name is called Star Chasers of Senegal, and it aired basically a year ago for the first time. It's actually won a couple of film awards at this point. I highly recommend it if you can track it down. I know that just in the past couple of weeks, it got released on YouTube. I don't know about the international distribution of that. So I know it's available in the US. I just don't know if it's there in Canada or not. Also, I had an article in the September 2023 issue of Sky and Telescope about our Polemily campaign in Kansas. And if you want to read more about what's going on with the Lucy occultation program, here's the third bullet. That URL will take you to our pages there, and we're still working on filling that out and providing more information. And then we've also got a website for the Recon project. And just as one final parting shot. We just had a nice flyby of Dinkinesh and with Lucy in November, and we're just astonished. The picture you see on the lower left, seeing two objects there, just blew us away. We just thought we were going to just fly by some nondescript rock, and this turned out to be just an amazing experience. And the geologic structure on there is really kind of amazing. We're giving a bunch of talks at the Lunar and Planetary Science Conference next week in Houston, where we'll be covering a lot of this stuff. The outbound image on the right, is looking at it from a 90 degrees different angle, where we see that the satellite is a contact binary. So we now have the second contact binary in the solar system that we know about from this. And this graph here is one of the things I'm talking about at LPSC. This is photometry of the system as we were departing. So this is unresolved brightness measurements. It just looks like a jumble of points, but it turns out that I was able to recover the two rotation periods. So Dinkinesh is rotating about once every 3.7 hours. And Salam is rotating every 57.6 hours. And so we were able to pull out this, and we were seeing things like mutual events, and we could tell which direction the object was rotating. So, I mean, you're going to be seeing a lot of this stuff coming out in publications and in news sources. And this is kind of a sneak peek of what's going to be coming out next week. And with that, I will leave you with a pretty picture of one of our telescopes looking at the galactic center. And I realize I ran on a bit, but I'm happy to take questions as long as you've got the energy to ask them.
Thank you very much, Dr. Buey. Questions? Do we have any questions? Is there any questions on the chat?
Yes. How do you measure the occultation time accurately? Is it done manually, or is there something that measures your time very accurately? What kind of equipment do you use for that?
Okay, so that's one of the great innovations that just appeared out of nowhere. We've got a new category of camera that's available now called CMOS, and that's been driven by the cell phone market. These are very fast, high sensitivity, cheap to build cameras, and one particular camera manufacturer named QHY in China integrated a GPS receiver into the electronics of the camera. So you attach a GPS antenna and there's a GPS engine on board that knows the time. So with every image that's taken with that camera, it throws time codes into the pixel data along with the image. And so you end up knowing the start time of every exposure good to a millisecond or better. This has fixed one of the biggest problems with occultation measurements that has ever existed. And it's not just enough to know that the star was occulted, you need to know when it was occulted. And a lot of the earlier techniques for that were using GPS, but they were a lot harder to work with these video time overlay units and things like that. With this one simple camera, you've got everything all in one package. And this is what all of my equipment is based around. And I highly recommend that anybody that wants to get into occultation work, please, if it's worth it, your time to do these observations, it's worth your time and money to get a camera like this. And as far as I know right now, there's only the one camera that does this. It's the QHY 174M for monochrome dash GPS. There are ways of doing it with other cameras that are much more fiddly and experimental and require a lot more expertise on the observer. There are ways of doing that, but this is by far the easiest and most cost-effective way to do it that I know of.
Thank you. Any other questions? Any questions from online? Well, Dr. Buey, thank you very much for, on behalf of the RASC Winnipeg Center, for it was an awesome talk, to be very honest. It was pretty cool. And I know there's some people in our center. I see Jerry's on there, Jerry Smirchansky, and he does a lot of work with oculations in the center. So I'm sure he found it extremely interesting. I found it very interesting. And I appreciate you really bringing this particular type of science to the community science level, like you said, and showing everyone that there's opportunities for all of us if we want to get involved. Thank you very much.
Sure. And one final parting thought. I've been working on a book that describes occultations, why we do it, what matters, and in a lot of detail. And I'm talking with publishers now. My hope is that by the end of the calendar year, that'll be available. So if you're interested, there will soon be something more to sink your teeth into. And I hope to convert many, many more people to this fun enterprise.
Thank you very much.
All righty. Cheers.
And that concludes our meeting for tonight. For those who are interested, again, we're gathering over at on Pembina Boston Pizza. And for those that are going over there, I hope you have a wonderful time. Thank you all tonight.